And it was kind of an antidote to the preceding chapters. And one of which I'm particularly fond because it doesn't come out that way, all of this, in any of the other books I've read on women and Celtic civilization. So, we start. Violence. Violence begins with a threat to identity. Threat to identity. And it escalates. It escalates until it becomes genocide. That's the path of violence. It gathers force. This is the other thesis. How a tribal culture, or what is an informal culture, becomes a formal system, and the institutions of the system, and then within that system is the primary group in which the family is raised. I first enunciated this thesis in one of my books on Northern Ireland to explain the in-group and out-groupness of things. But it applies so much to the status of women and the destruction of women through the institutions of a society that it had to be here. And you see that the formal society is bounded by an economic system. And if we look at where we are today in this country, we see again that our institutions are bounded by the economic system, and they're formalized, and they're part of the imposition on the primary group, and the object is to fit within them. And not the least are the religious institutions. And here's where all of these things fit together. I'm just going to give you what's at the end of the book first, okay? If you're on a spectrum from left to right, and you think that the extremes of the left to the right are the farthest you can go, when it comes to women, the left and the right come together. And the fate of women in the extremist, politicized, religious societies is the same. Left, Chinese Cultural Revolution, Maoism, and many others, where everything female is to be destroyed. And right, where Saudi women are today, where the Haredi in Israel are today, they come together. They come together. So that's the institutional basis. And now we'll go to the fun part. I'm going to tell you about how humans came about and some of the differences. And we start in Africa. Of course, all humans start in Africa. And the story of human development starts in Africa. But before Africa, and I'm hoping that my friend back there who's handling this, we were a primate group. And I'm going to tell you a little story. I worked as a primatologist back in the 60s at the Los Angeles Zoo. And I came to know and love my cousins. And I found so much to love in them. And it suddenly occurred to me when I was watching a pair of orangutans with whom I'd been working on learning mate. It was an extraordinary event. They just don't let themselves be watched in the wild. And I felt really privileged. And it suddenly struck me that only human, it was like a ballet. It was fantastic. Only human males rape. Orangutans, chimpanzees, gorillas, macaques, seals, sea lions, lions and tigers, horses, they don't rape. You go all the way down the evolutionary scale to chickens, and you find roosters rape. So men who rape are cocks. And yeah, you have to keep that in mind when we try to understand this is not the human intended behavior. None of our relatives do it. It's something that is tolerated, it's something that is sanctioned in many places, too many places. And it couldn't happen without the sanction. Couldn't happen. So, now we are ready to go back to my favorite people, the orangutans and macaques. I wanted you to notice in the picture of the two macaques who are actually involved in a very lovely form of foreplay. The male was sucking the toes of the female. And it reminded me of Fergie. And the famous picture of Fergie with her lover. And I said, you know, that is much more human than what we credit as the special character of the human being and our differentiation from apes. We're not different in being able to love. We can all love, and our cousins can love. The only way we're different is the kind of use we make of violence. So, got some other pictures of some of my, his face didn't come out. Oh, this one, he was really relaxing and, you know, taking his ease, as you can see. One of my favorite creatures, the orangutan. And it's peace, it's happiness, it's satisfaction, okay? So then we get to Africa and the beginning of the human being. All life began, all human life began in Africa. And these are some of the places that I'm talking about. And this is a Maasai mother and her child. But this is, in Africa, the beast of burden. This is the woman. And one of the kinds of violence imposed. I talk in the book about my first experience of being present with female-gentleman relation, FGM. It was in Kenya. It was in a Christian village. And I was there on an Irish Development Board project that was intended for what we call the unwed mothers who were living on the edge of the village in these shacks, and they had no land, and their support was by running a shebeen and being prostitutes. And the Development Board was putting in, they were helping them build a piggery. And I was present for the installation of the well. And I suddenly heard the shrieks. And I turned to the nun who was my guide and I said, are there pigs here now? And she said, no. That's a girl, a 14-year-old, who's being circumcised. And I said, how can you, a Christian, Christian countenance this? How can it happen? And she said, well, the girls want it because they're afraid if they're not circumcised, they won't have a husband, and you see what happens to women who don't have a husband. They have no property, they have no rights, they have to be prostitutes, they are without society, without village. And then she went on to explain that the mothers, the aunts, the grandmothers, hold the girls down. They're screaming, and it's other women who do it to them. Now, one of the things that I learned all the way through this is that when women are brutalized, often other women, their closest relatives, are forced either by the psychology or the sociology of the place or actual physical force to conduct some of the brutalization. In China, foot binding was done by the mother to the daughter. And the mother would have to, every couple of months, break her foot again to keep it from growing. Tremendous pain inflicted on this little child. A mother who loved her and wanted only the best for her knew that she had small enough feet she could get a good husband. This is the kind of psychology that prevails in violence against women. Can you blame a mother? I don't think so. But it's a social behavior. And the African mother who's desperate for her daughter will not only tolerate but facilitate and help the daughter believe that this is necessary. So we go on from there. And of course, South Africa, we go all the way through, you'll see South African kids in Soweto, and they're one of my closest friends, the late Wangari Maathai, who was the founder of the Greenbelt movement and one of her assistants in Kenya. And Wangari, this was the other important thing that I learned about Africa and the destruction of women. It's very important. Wangari was a Kikuyu, born on the side of Mount Kenya, and her family were very proud of their identity and very proud of her. And she had as some of her role models some of the older women who'd been part of what was called by the British the Mau Mau Rebellion. They're extraordinary women. I met some of them. I was very fortunate. And they gave Wangari the understanding that she, as a Kikuyu, as a woman, was brave, was strong, and important. The second step in Wangari's development was that the nuns, the Loreto nuns, who taught her, picked her out as a very good student with potentials in science. And they were trying to encourage, back a while, to encourage women in science. And they encouraged her, and they saw to it that she went to college in the United States, that she went to graduate school, and she eventually became the first woman professor at the University of Nairobi. That is not without its challenges, and it's not without a lot of discrimination, a lot of pain. But she faced it, and then went on to found the Greenbelt movement, and then went on to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and the first African woman, the first environmentalist to get that. So I learned a lot from Wangari about the resilience and what makes resilience. And it's the